Hello and welcome to this review of my Anidees Prismatic RGB keyboard. This keyboard is a donation from a viewer. Thanks again, May. It's pretty interesting as this is one of the first modern low-profile keyboards to be covered on this channel. There will be others in the future though. Low-profile keyboards are popular again, and Kailh were ready for it with their PG1350 line of switches, better known as the Kailh Chocolate switch, or just Kailh Choc, which is inspired by the design of Cherry ML, although unlike ML, the series also includes a linear and a clicky version. Even Cherry themselves responded to the low-profile hype with their Cherry low-profile switches, presumably because they correctly decided their own ML series of low-profile switches were inadequate, which they most definitely are. The Kailh Choc clicky switch is responsible for giving us the click bar. It was originally designed to be a clicker compatible with such a short height switch, although it was soon after incorporated into several full height switch designs as well, such as Kailh Bronze and most notably Kailh Box White, Pale Blue, Navy, Jade and Pink, which are very interesting switches in their own right and which I've covered before on the channel in quite some detail. This keyboard actually uses clones of clicky blue Kailh Choc. The switches are called Fraly Blue. Yeah, apparently Chocs are already being cloned now too. These Fraly switches are also used on the Keychron K1, which apart from being 10 keyless, appears to be almost exactly the same keyboard, judging by the pictures. That one costs about $75, this one is roughly the same at $70. So, does the board hold up? Well, the switches are interesting, that's for sure. According to the manufacturer, the switches have 3mm of travel and actuate at 1.2mm with an actuating force of 60 grams plus or minus 15 grams, or 12.5 feet Fahrenheit in imperial, which means that the travel is a bit short but it's not super short or anything, and should actuate fairly easily, although the weighting tolerance they specify is rather alarmingly high. Although, to be honest, the board doesn't feel all that inconsistent in weighting, so I think it's a bit exaggerated. They were probably just covering their backs. The switches have a small but sharp tactile vent somewhere in the middle of the travel, and a high-pitched but clear clicky sound. It's not that unpleasant, to be honest. I had been wondering what these Choc-style clicky switches were like ever since they announced that click bar, and I'm pleased to say that it works pretty nicely. Although they do click on the upstroke as well, which is a limitation inherent to the click bar design which not everyone may like. These switches inspire a very light style of typing though, which is nice and relaxed. I like it. That said, they made one colossal mistake with these Fraly clones. The actuation point is completely mismatched with the tactile bump. They mentioned that the actuation point is at roughly 1.2mm, but to that I can only say, your mother is roughly 1.2mm. In fact, the switches actuate at the slightest, merest touch, and there's virtually no travel at all before they fire, and that's really a problem, as we'll see in a bit. The keyboard was obviously designed for portability, being very small and light, just 314 grams. For reference, that's 29% of the footprint of a Model M and 15% of the weight, so pretty portable. It comes with Bluetooth functionality, but you can also use it with a cord. It comes with a braided micro USB cable by default. I have tried out the Bluetooth mode, and it works decently actually. To make it portable, they went with a rather small 67 key layout, and it's very confusing. It's a bit bigger than a 60% layout, but like a 75% layout, they try to cram a whole buttload of buttons in there, and it doesn't work all that great in this case, in my opinion. The worst is the right shift, which is just a single unit big, but I use that one more or less constantly, so that's really a problem. They also went with 2 FN keys, but only 1 control key, and that just seems like a bad design choice in my opinion. I'm already not a big fan of dependency on layer keys, but to actually detract from the rest of the layout by inclusion of them is just too much for me. And the single unit backspace is not exactly a bag of yay either. I think the layout could be much improved by just adding a single extra column to the right side of the keyboard. That way you could have a bigger shift and backspace key, uncrowd the spacebar area a bit, and maybe add a few nav buttons which are otherwise missing at the moment. Furthermore, the problem of the crappy layout is massively exacerbated by the keycaps. The keys are a standard 3/4 inches big, insert joke about Bronze Age measurements here, which is okay, but because the keycaps are completely flat, there is very little space between them. See, in a normal keyboard, the keycaps taper towards the top, and this means that the space between the striking spots is much bigger. Usually it's around the 7mm mark. On this keyboard, it's as little as 3mm, and with keys this over-responsive, that means it's excessively easy to make mistakes while typing, because you keep triggering keys you're trying to avoid. So when the product page says multi-key anti-ghosting ensures the most accurate simultaneous key presses, they're not just talking anti-ghosting bullshit, but it's also plain wrong as it's not accurate at all. That said, the keyboard does appear to have full N-key rollover though, not limited to 6 by the USB interface either. Now, the problem of accidentally pressing multiple keys at the same time isn't as big a deal during gaming, but under those conditions another problem manifests itself, because the keyboard is so hypersensitive and the actuation point is so mismatched, it's extremely easy to set them off with just the weight of your fingers resting on them. It's quite comparable in this regard to the issue I had with the Fraly Iori keyboard I reviewed recently, except it's even worse. It is also a big problem during typing though. I constantly find myself suddenly typing at the start of a sentence or on the next row, or accidentally deleting everything, or just adding lots of letters that aren't supposed to be there. It's absolutely infuriating. This is one of those boards that in the end I just got completely sick of. The board has full RGB lighting, and because of its case and keycap design, it may be the most ostentatious light show I've seen on a keyboard yet. Because there's no rims on the case, there's a lot of light bleed from under the switches, and the flat keycap sides strongly reflect the lighting, so it's almost as if they're lighting up too. Besides, there's a ribbon of transparent material in the case itself, which also lets the light through for even more rainbow vomit. So if you're looking for a Christmas tree to type on, look no further. By the way, this lighting setup is also very sensitive to board chow showing up, so if you want to enjoy the sight of food bits, skin flakes and other debris in the spotlight, this is the keyboard for you. It uses thin laser-ablated ABS keycaps with a mount that's not Cherry ML compatible. It's centered instead of offset like ML are. Being laser-ablated ABS, I suspect the lifetime of these caps will be quite short. Honestly, I think the switch feel is really not bad at all. It's not really competitive with non-shit full travel, full height switches perhaps, but better than shitty full height ones in my opinion. I might sound somewhat negative on them, which I'm really not, but I'm somewhat hesitant to shower too much praise on a switch that's this oversensitive and mismatched with its tactile bump, and the idiotic keycaps really aren't helping it either. I think this keyboard got mismarketed maybe. This really isn't supposed to be a generic gaming keyboard. The hypersensitive, too closely spaced keys and unnecessary weight and space saving, never mind the impractical layout, kinda ruin it for that. But it is light and small, and typing on it isn't unsatisfying, it's just very inaccurate. But I think you could eventually get used to it maybe for use with games on a tablet while traveling. I know this is very specific, but who knows, it might work. You know what? It's better than a touchscreen. Let's just keep it at that. I think that gives it just the right amount of praise for a general conclusion. Overall though, it feels like a typical case of form over function. There are too many deficiencies with this keyboard in my opinion, and while the portability aspect will definitely have its advantages, I can't help but shake the feeling that it was designed primarily for how it looks instead. I have another keyboard with low profile switches that I'll be reviewing further down the line, and based just off of first impressions, asterisk, that seems to be much better, so I wouldn't recommend this one. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard.